All right. I think we're live, Matthew Fairburn. We'll let some people trickle in here. I see there's some people already in the chat. We'll kick it off properly tonight. Happy Monday, everyone. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live here on April 15th. Happy tax day, Matthew. It's a very taxing season for the fan base. But have no fear. The Sabres end the season on the warpath with a 4-2 victory in Tampa. Dylan Cousins ended the year on a high note with a pair of goals. Jordan Greenway gets one. Zach Benson with a single, continuing a nice, surprising season. Maybe a little bright spot there. We'll get into that. But as people trickle in, we'll get the formal process out of the way. If you could please, everyone, like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live, especially in the off season. We'll get into that. And you can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could please leave a 5-star review. So Matthew, as mentioned, 4-2 victory tonight. Sabres end the season with a 39-37-6 record, good for 84 points in the standings, plus 2 goal differential. So, man, it's been a long season on the beat for you, kid. How you feeling after 82 games?
Yeah, I'm excited for this off season because it feels like we've been talking about it since January.
Yeah.
About, late January when they started to really realistically fall out of the race, and we were looking at what decisions needed to be made, what decisions would be made or not made, and at this point, the head coach is still in place. He's scheduled to have a press conference at the end of the week. That is not necessarily a 100%, stone cold lock. Friday's a long way away. So, minds can be changed, but I think that's our latest indication among many hints that he will remain the head coach. And so now we're getting into that portion of the calendar that you and I have been kind of having the gears turning on for months. And I know a lot of people in the chat, a lot of fans, a lot of readers, everybody's been on that same page, save for about maybe a week and a half when the Sabres flirted with pulling back into the race. A lot of people have been in off-season mode, and it feels like it's such a big off-season for this team that finally hitting the end point on the 82 games feels like we can turn the page in earnest.
I'm ready to go. We won't take much of a break. It's been good for me. So I think it's been 12 days since we last got together. And literally, I didn't really think about this team for a good week and a half. I text you here and there, but it was nice to just unplug, kind of get away. Amerks coming up. We'll talk a little bit about them. They look pretty primed for a nice run, but no, it was just nice to unplug and get the thoughts organized and kind of carve out what our off-season agenda looks like. There is going to be an off-season agenda. There will be a steady stream of these podcasts coming out in between me 3-putting every green at Cloverbank this year. But I guess there was some good news this year. I was looking up some numbers tonight, just getting ready to, get my mind back in coming up and not thinking about the team for a little bit. And the good news that I found was that the Sabres were better on home ice this season, with a 21-19-1 record. The bad news is pretty much everything else. So as we start breaking down this season, and again, we have a lot of time to do so. But I guess we'll just get into that. I mean, I agree with what you just said. I mean, it's an important off season. Like you, I think that, Don Granato is going to be here for a little bit. Not just this week, but beyond. He's going to make it to Friday and then probably beyond. How he maneuvers through the rest of his bench and the staff. That's going to be a nice off-season topic for us to discuss. The Regina Pats today in the Western Hockey League, I noticed they extended their head coach and one of their assistants, but they did not renew one of their assistants and one of their goalie coaches. So it can happen. It can happen. That's one example of a few that we will see like that this offseason. Will the Buffalo Sabres be one of those teams that maybe keeps one assistant or two, maybe one assistant and a goalie coach or something, right? But yeah, a lot to get into. But yeah, the bad news, pretty much everything else. I noticed that the Sabres did not score again tonight on the power play, right? So I was looking at some power play numbers. I mean, to me, that's been the biggest story this season. You and I have talked about slow starts, but the power play, man. And I was going through my mental Rolodex from early in the season, like the preseason, and keep me honest here. Did Zach Benson? I want to say Zach Benson was in the bumper position in preseason.
It was one of the first moments he had in the preseason where he had that nice assist from the bumper. It might have been the very first preseason game that he played. It felt like one of the first moments that it was like, this guy might make the team. And here we are later in the season, and he's starting to get a little bit more of that time. He's piling up some of those points. But this power play, it's a good place to dissect the season, because I think it can splinter into a bigger conversation about the team and what the offseason looks like and how you evaluate what did and didn't go wrong. On the one hand, if they were an average power play team, they might be a playoff team. I think they were 29th last I checked. Haven't, in the last couple of days, the results of the last couple of days, I'm not sure if that changed, but
I had
somewhere
him
in that neighborhood.
28th coming into tonight. Just for the record, just to kind of level set, I had him scoring 37 power play goals, 16.74%. They generated the third fewest chances in the league. And when you compare and contrast, these numbers, I think, might help you kind of go deeper on your point. Last year, they were ninth best. 63 power play goals. So 37 this year, 63 last year. To your point about just being average, okay? They were a little bit slightly above average last year. They clicked at 23.42% last year, and they earned the 11th most power plays in the league. So you go from getting a lot of opportunities to getting near the bottom of the league in opportunities, which is indicative of a lot of things, by the way. When you're not drawing penalties, you don't have the puck a lot. Maybe you're not moving your feet a lot. Maybe you're not going to the net. Get defensemen to engage, put a stick on you, right? But anyways, really interesting, those numbers. Because to me, that is the story. You can talk about the slow starts, it's power play. So I'll let you continue. I just want to level set with those numbers because I actually did do some research tonight.
You're always more well prepared than you give yourself credit for. You like to downplay it, but we all know you can't fool us. That power play, if it was decent, if it was 20th, if it was 15th, might have been enough to close the gap on their major scoring drop off. But the reason I find it an interesting conversation point is, well, how do you fix it? Right? Is what everybody's going to wonder. What's wrong with it? How do you fix it? We could get into the nitty gritty on that, and that would be a worthwhile conversation. You're on mute, kid. You didn't unmute yourself.
Shit, sorry, I was clearing my throat. That's why I brought up the bumper, by the way, tactically. But go ahead. Yeah.
Right. It was actually on Eclipse Day that I texted you the total eclipse heat map of the Sabres power play,
Oh
if
my
you
God,
remember.
yeah. Oh.
And I'll post it in a story at some point or post it on Twitter, but the front of the net and the slot is dark blue for the Sabres. And I sent you the Hurricanes as an example. I think they're second in the league in power play, and it is the bright spot on theirs. Bright red is just front of the net. A simple solution, right? A simple tactical thing that they don't do, a skill maybe that they don't have, a skill set that wasn't present. They tried to put Greenway there. Adding Benson maybe has helped a little bit, but this is a power play that from the second half of last season started to tail off. It's part of the coaching conversation, adjustments and scheming. There's talent on that power play. There is a man who scored 47 goals last season. There is a defenseman who is among the league leaders each year in goals scored by a defenseman in Rasmus Dahlin, who gets paid $11 million a year. Alex Tuck, is a good player. Dylan Cousins, top 10 pick. There's talent on this power play. Don Granato was supposed to be more involved as the season went along, and the improvement always seemed like it came for a week, and then they went right back to where they were. It came for a couple of games, but over the we now have an 82 game sample, and they were one of the worst power play teams in the league. So it's sort of a coaching conversation, but it also leads me into something that's been on my mind when we zoom out, right? We're now removed from the game by game, night by night emotions of an 82 game season. And you can say, of all these things that went wrong, of all these conversations we've had, all these talking points deserved about this team, their lack of competitiveness for stretches of the season, their inability to get to the front of the net, their bad power play, they're still not great defensively. The top players not performing well, injuries happening at bad times. They're still an 84-point team. They're still maybe a decent power play away from being a playoff team in an Eastern Conference where nobody seemed to want to make the playoffs. So if you're Kevin Adams and you're going into the offseason, the challenge, I think, for Kevin Adams, the big overarching challenge that defines the rest of the other mini challenges that he will face is looking realistically, honestly, at what happened and saying, striking a balance between urgency and not panicking. Because you went all this way, right? You were patient. You built through the draft. You did all this. You accumulated this young talent. And you're one of the youngest teams in the league, and you had 91 points one year, 84 the next, when probably easily should have been 90, with a few of the small things that we talked about. You cannot sit there on one hand and say, well, youngest team in the league, we were close. We'll just run it back. That's not acceptable. I don't think anybody in this fan base is going to accept that as the sales pitch.
That was last year. Yeah.
It was acceptable last year to an extent. Obviously, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But you also cannot blow it up and be overly emotional and panic about what's happening either. But it is such a fine line. Last year's, Kevin Adams didn't panic last offseason, but you could argue he didn't act nearly enough, because even though the messaging at the end of the season was appropriate, hey, this was close, a few tweaks, and we could get there, the action didn't follow. The tweaks weren't significant enough. You didn't replace Jack Quinn. You didn't address the Victor Olofsson situation. And here we are 82 games later. He's still on the roster, collected $4.75 million of Terry Pegula's money, and didn't give the Sabres much to show for it. You added 2 defensemen. One of them couldn't even crack your lineup by the time the trade deadline rolled around, and you dumped him for a pick. Your captain came back. You convinced him to come back, and he's going to finish the season chasing a Stanley Cup in South Florida. All of these things, a lot of people were sitting here this time last year saying, man, if they could get a top 4 defenseman, or if they could add some talent on the third and fourth lines, maybe change a few pieces out. Now we're sitting here having the same conversations. So that's a long way to travel from the power play wasn't very good. But it makes me think, because damn, are they close? They really are close. But I think the last 12 months should show Kevin Adams that close still means you need to push, because there's a lot of mess in the Eastern Conference. There's a lot of teams that were pretty close. There's a lot of teams that are right there. They need to make the right moves. And this is a defining offseason, I think, for Kevin Adams, assuming he's the one that gets to steer the ship. And I have no indication that wouldn't be the case. He's also scheduled to speak on Friday. So we can sit here today and assume it'll be Kevin Adams and Don Granato steering the ship. And every decision they make should be career defining at this point, because
at this point,
what they put on the ice next year will be their resume.
No, I agree. And like, so you said about blowing it up. I don't think they have to blow it up. I think you can be very tactful. I think they have natural, organic ways to make the team better just with some expiring contracts and creating competition. And just forget the young guys for a second because it's not about them. You're going to give them a chance to compete for roster spots, whether it's Kulik, Rosane, Savoy, whoever. Give them chances, but it's not about that. It's about, I don't like, I see some wild commentary on Dylan Cousins. And this has nothing to do with him scoring a pair of goals last night. And maybe he goes off into his offseason with a better taste in his mouth. I'm not at all worried about Dylan Cousins. And a very short-sighted person will say, Baker, are you crazy? Well, I'm not a short-sighted person when it comes to Dylan Cousins. I see a lot of good in his game. I have zero worries about his game. I think he'll rebound nicely next year, and I think he'll be a key component to this team. And I've said that many times on this podcast with you that I think he's the key to making this whole thing happen. I'm not worried about Dylan Cousins. With that said, I'm starting to look at Skinner, no goals in his final 13 games. I think he had 1 assist in his final 13 games. I think he's your highest paid forward. And then I'm looking at that. I'm looking at, what do you do, with Tage? Tage's the biggest disappointment for me this season. Skinner, you could argue, is bigger disappointment. Tage is a number one centerman. And you think that maybe when I guess we'll find out, I'm sure you're going to ask him about his health and things like that. But didn't score nearly enough. Number one centerman. Didn't even get 60 points this year. Didn't miss a ton of games. And I know he played better. I don't think he hit 60, did he?
He didn't hit 60, and I don't think
he hit 50.
Let's see what he ended up at.
29
goals.
Yeah. So
56 points, 29 goals. And yes, he missed what? I believe 10 games with the wrist. He played 72 games, 71 games here.
And he leaves again tonight with a lower body injury.
So
I have questions there. I'm not questioning Cousins. I'm not questioning, Quinn. Got to stay healthy. Covering prospects, all I hear about is Noah Austin's always hurt. All I hear about is Matthew Savoy's always hurt. Quinn has got to stay healthy. But I'm not worried about like that. And Benson, not worried about him. I'm starting to question now, what was your top line? At least 2/3 of what was your top line entering the season. You've already seen Skinner go down the lineup. Got to figure out that whole thing. But yeah, it's I wanted to start talking about the power play, but you're right. You can go a long way and you get crazy, but it's like, I've always said that like the coach doesn't teach guys how to score. You teach them how to defend and like prevent the other team from scoring. I'm ready to abandon that. You got to teach the guys how to score again on the power play. How you go shopping this year, you got to get help for the power play behind the bench, but maybe also another layer of offense on the power play just to buffer yourself and insulate yourself in case more of the stuff that happened this year carries into next year. We're going to talk about that this offseason. I think there's going to be some compelling names to throw into the hopper to discuss what's it going to take to get them. Free agency, trade. I don't want to go crazy spoiler, but that's where I'm starting to question what we thought was like this veteran group. And I want to hear what they have to say before flying off the handle and getting a little crazy and turning the knob up. I don't think you need to blow it up like crazy, like you said. I want to hear the accountability from some of these guys, but I want to feel it. It's one thing to hear it. You got to feel it. And it's going to be a very interesting week for you down at the arena with player availability for 2 days, and then Kevin Adams and Don Granato on Friday. And then we'll get back together and we'll reassess and we'll just suss it all out. But that's kind of where my head's at right now, fresh off the 82nd game.
Yeah, I think that's the right place to turn the focus if you're Kevin Adams, because your top players did not produce nearly enough. That goes for Tage Thompson. It goes for Jeff Skinner. It goes for Alex Tuck. It goes for Dylan Cousins. I mean, really the only one, and he didn't match his point total from last season, but I wouldn't say he was a major disappointment, is Rasmus Dahlin. Still producing points for you, and I think his game, to me, didn't drop off much, if at all, from last season. It's the other guys up front. I think Owen Power's game took a little bit of a step back this year, and I think some of those guys up front really took a step back. JJ Peterka took a step forward. Quinn couldn't stay healthy. The rest, you could argue, all disappointed. And so you have to sit there and honestly assess it as Kevin Adams. And, how does he feel about Dylan Cousins, right? How does he feel? Because his top two centers were supposed to be locked in place at
Yep.
great contracts. 12 months ago, $7 million a piece for those two guys and some change was looking like a great bargain, like a shrewd move to get out in front of those contracts.
And in this market, you have to.
Yeah, it was. And I don't blame them for either contract. I still think they have a chance to be really good contracts. I think Dylan Cousins could be a really good contract. Tage Thompson, if he's not the 40-plus goal scorer, is not necessarily a bargain anymore at $7 million. So he needs to, it's an interesting offseason conversation with him. Who is he playing with next year? Because in your world of prospects, a lot of the talk lately has been, from within the organization for guys like Cooley, Roseanne, less so Savoy because he's not in Rochester yet, but same type of conversation is that now these guys, who are they going to displace? Because the idea is, well, Tage's job is safe. Dylan's job is safe. Well, maybe they need to rethink what the top six looks like, not just next year, but into the following year and the year after that, because they do have prospects who can project as top six players. So are some of those spots open? But the flip side of that is, can this team really afford to get younger and more inexperienced? And the answer to that is probably no. So what do? You need a third center either way. You already opened up that spot when you traded Casey Middlestat. Peyton Krebs did not grab the job from where I was sitting. And that's a major disappointment and another question heading into the offseason. You can't just roll the dice and think that, you need to have an insurance plan there. You need arguably a fourth line center, unless Peyton Krebs is that guy and you fill the third line center job. Those are all secondary questions, though, to the fact that, do you have your top two centers still? Or is Tage Thompson better as a wing, or is he better at center? If the top six add that you can make, assuming they're willing to take a big swing, is a center, does that make you rethink things? Do you put Tage on Cousins' wing? Do you, reshuffle things? Skinner, to me, is the easiest answer of the bunch, and it's that he does not belong in your top six anymore.
Nope. No.
He's not playing that way. I guess the worst / best case scenario is that you just find a way to make him useful on the third line, but you need to find the right center, and it doesn't appear Peyton Krebs is that center based on the audition you saw. So
the biggest problem I have with the offseason, Matthew, is the prospect of Skinner being on the third line. Because it's going to be we're going to have to talk about that one. I don't see it. I don't see it working. You need him right now because there's two ways to look at it, right? A guy that can score like that, if you can get him a competent third line centerman that's got a little more straight line game, hard nosed game that actually contributes and can get him the puck, he could be very good in matchups. We talked about this a couple episodes ago. You're stuck with him, right? Kevin Adams has to just sit down, have a very heart-to-heart conversation with Jeff Skinner, like this week or maybe early next week, and figure that out. But sorry, I stepped on you. You were in the middle of a thought, but it's been really bothering me because a couple of weeks ago I was like, I could live with him there. Now I'm not sure I can. Because when you're going to watch the playoffs and you're going to see some teams that go deep in the playoffs that aren't going to have room for everybody next year, those are the guys that I'm looking to pick off. And I need those third line spots.
You do. You need more spots, and I do feel like you kind of need a spot or two for some of these prospects to take a crack at it. That's the trouble I have is the spots they have available to them right now need to be probably allotted to veterans who change the dynamic of your forward group. But you also kind of want a shot in the arm. You kind of want to give Savoy a shot or Kulik a shot because it feels like they're getting to that point where they could maybe knock the door down with a good offseason. And you want to give them a chance to do that. But you kind of need Skinner's spot, I think, to do that. So it actually, I would say, leads into another conversation, which is something I wrote about a little bit last week, which is that a lot of this falls back on Terry Pagula, right? Because we had a comment in the chat about, was Kevin Adams, hamstrung at all? And it's going to be a difficult question to ever answer. But I feel like this offseason actually gives us some answers because the best hockey move might be to buy out Jeff Skinner, right? Now, like you said, if you can have a really honest and really good conversation with Jeff Skinner, somehow convince him to waive that no move clause and go somewhere, that works. But then you still have to have salary retention if you're going to move that contract, which is again going to come down to cash spending from ownership to an extent. The buyout certainly will. The buyout is still a decent option, I think, because the highest cap hit in the whole buyout is 6 point something, high 6. That still gives you 2.2 million of savings, and I think you can find a better player for 2.2 million. But
this is the time to do that, by the way, because you're going to have some young guys on entry-level contracts. You're going to have Benson here. Rusak's probably going to be up pretty cheap. Levi's not going to break the bank. You have a little window here where you can probably spend money on a guy to not play for you the next couple of years.
Is ownership willing to do it? And it's the column I wrote last week was more focused on Don Granato because the case I hear all the time is that he hasn't started his contract extension, so he's not going to get fired because Terry Pagula won't pay him not to coach. To which I say,
it's all speculation, though.
All speculation, and throw it out the window and make me a hockey case to keep the coach. That's what I'm more interested in, because if there's not a hockey case and the only case is to not pay $3.8 million or in that neighborhood of 2 years of Don Granato's salary, then Terry Pagula, deserves that criticism because to me, there's not a super strong hockey case just yet. It goes double if you bring back Don Granato and the same group of assistants, because then you're just not doing everything possible to, upgrade an area that really seems like it needs upgrading at this point. An inexperienced staff that didn't get the results. So those are a few financial pieces that are interesting to me. If you could make a hockey case in both of those, Jeff Skinner and Don Granato, to keep them around. I just think most people would agree that the hockey case is not super strong in either case. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how they navigate those two. And then they're always going to have the problem of convincing people to come here in free agency. And so that leads to, I think it led to some hesitation to part with guys that they knew that were willing. Zemgus Girgensons, Tyson Jost. These guys are Kyle Okposo, obviously. These guys they want to be in Buffalo. They're here. They're comfortable. They're good teammates. They're good guys and got decent results. So bring them back, because if you let Zemgus Girgensons walk, who knows if you're going to get that guy that you've targeted to even put you on his list? How much are you going to have to overpay him? I don't know if any of that creeped into their thinking in terms of how they kept this roster the way it was. So will that play into the Jeff Skinner situation? Will it be a case of, this is a guy they know they can get something out of him? Didn't do it for the last month, but I don't know. It just feels like he's out of place in a big way when you sketch out forward lines. There's just not a good place to put him.
He's out of place, and you can argue whether or not he earned the no move clause, but he earned it by virtue of an NHL general manager giving it to him. He has every right to say, Kevin, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not interested. I like it here. You know what I mean? And I think it's going to be very difficult to get out of that. And then you're looking at, a buyout. And I don't want to go down this path again with Brian Cummings. I know he's in the chat. Well, we can. He can throw the numbers up again. It doesn't look like it's the best fiscal decision to buy him out right now. Right? Isn't there like a big,
there's one big number. It's like 6.8. And
that's huge.
It's like a couple years from now. It is huge, but you know what else is huge? $9 million. And that's what you're paying him anyways to be on your team. Get rid of the 9, eat the 6 point whatever, and take the 2 point something and go find a better player. How hard is that? Probably not as hard, especially a couple years from now, because you also have the first couple years of that buyout that are much smaller numbers, where you could go find 2 or 3 players that can upgrade your lineup a lot more than Skinner did this season. So it's another interesting part of just the hockey side of this is, where's that wall coming for Jeff Skinner? He turns 32 next month. Is there's some signs of it this year, right? He didn't have a good year that he was slowing down a little bit maybe at the end of the year, got a little banged up. Not everybody plays their best hockey into their mid-30s. So what does he have left is another interesting piece of this, because if ever there's an opportunity to trade him, this might be your last chance.
That's the move. I think that's the financially responsible move, eating some of it. That's the move. I mean, you just saw what he's going to do on your third line. He didn't score in his last 13 games. He had a hat trick. That was the last time he scored against Seattle. Double check me.
And it's not that he can still score to an extent, right? I mean, obviously he had a cold streak to end the season. You're not going to replace those points automatically. You're not going to replace those points. You're not even necessarily going to take the $2 million in savings and find a player who can score like Jeff Skinner, but you might be able to, but you can probably find a player who makes your team better. And you have prospects who can now jump into scoring roles who, JJ Peterka is ready to be where Jeff Skinner was last year and do it better, potentially.
Yeah.
That goes for other players within the organization, freeing up that roster spot and then going to find a third or fourth line winger with the $2 million. And that's just 1 year. In other years, you're saving, James Campbell just threw the numbers in: 1.4, 4.4, 6.4, 2.4, 2.4. So you have $7.6 million in the first year of savings, that, and a roster spot, an extra one. What are you doing with $7.6 million? Now, of course, you got to account for the fact that it goes to 4.4 and 6.4, but in the last 2 years, 2.4 each. Still better than having them on your team for $9 million. It's that 1 year of 6.4 that you have to figure out how to eat. That's the third year of it, when the cap might be a little bit trickier. So, but the cap's also going up. All those things worth considering, I think.
1.444, 6.4, 2.4, 2.4.
It's not a bad contract. It was is what it comes down to. I mean, they got the most they could out of it. I think Don Granato got the most they could out of it, considering where the narrative of that contract was before Don Granato took over as head coach. It looked like a really, really bad contract before that. But
I mean, what
right
if you get him
now,
a centerman, though? I mean, that's where we were. I'm back on that for a little bit. We got to talk through every angle of this. Okay. Part of the reason why I bring up the fit isn't just how we ended. It goes back also to Kevin Adams' conversation with the media about wanting to have an identity, a clear identity in his bottom six. Not sure what 1/6 of that being Jeff Skinner does, unless part of that identity is a secondary layer of scoring with a competent center. I keep going back to that. Home ice matchups mainly. But I don't know. We got to think through that every angle. I'm stuck on that buyout number. I don't like that. I know the cap's going up. I hear your case. I hear it. I don't like it.
you're probably not
I don't,
convincing
I
him
don't,
to waive the combination of convincing him to waive the no move clause and convincing another team to take him, I think will be tough. And I don't love the idea of the Sabres adding an asset to Jeff Skinner just to get out of the contract, depending, of course, on the asset. But I don't love that idea either. So the third option is that you find a way to get more out of him in that third line role. And that is, to your point, personnel driven to an extent. Find him the right center, the right winger on the other side, but also having that conversation with Jeff Skinner about what this means. Can a 32-year-old adjust his game in the later stages of his career to be a good third liner and what that requires? I don't know. That's something Jeff Skinner should have to, you know, that maybe they try to get out of Jeff Skinner, but that at this point, Jeff Skinner should have to look at himself and say, how many years I got left? I've never played in the playoffs. Does he think this team is close? If he doesn't, or if he, you know, wants to play in the playoffs, then maybe that no move conversation goes differently. But if he does, it's time to face the reality of being at this stage in your career, some younger players passing him by, and maybe adjust his game. I just don't know, that we're going to see that happen. Maybe it's just a small adjustment, but I just don't know that we're going to get a different player.
what if you go out and you get yourself another banger of just shoot for the stars, stars align. You get a big top six forward and moves a guy like Alex Tuck down opposite Skinner on a line. Let's just forget about numbering lines for a second, but that's a unit. Skinner, exit center. You got part of the band back together, a new centerman. You're going to say, where are your assets that you're going to get this player that's going to play, let's just say, with Peterka and Thompson? Let's not disrupt Quinn, Benson, Cousins for a second. That's possible. Where are you going to get the assets? Draft capital. It's well established that I'm all open for business on moving the pick if it kind of stays where it is. Got prospects. Got, maybe a defenseman you can get creative with. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what teams are open for business. That's a possibility there too. I'm trying to build a case to just kind of roll with Skinner one more year. Just like we built a business case. What's the case for Granato, or what isn't the case for Granato? You got to kind of look at it from every angle. I'm just thinking on my feet. I know thinking out loud is dangerous. It's kind of what we're doing here right now. I just want to throw that out there. Balance.
Well,
you have a balance
you have
line.
to make that case. You have to, because as Steve, 13th Legion, points out, if I'm a playoff team, I don't want Jeff Skinner. Buffalo buttered this bread, and you got to get value out of that game.
No playoff team has ever had Jeff Skinner.
Moving him is going to be difficult, right? Like, he might not want to move, but even if he does, that's assuming somebody would want him. And at that number, even with half retention, there's just a lot of assumptions that go into finding a trade that doesn't seem like it would happen. The buyout, you know, even removing whether Terry Pagula would want to eat the money is almost secondary to whether Kevin Adams would want it on his cap, and whether it's the best, or the better move is to just, you know, grit your teeth and get through the rest of the contract and try to get some sort of value out of him. So not a lot of great options there with your highest paid forward, Kris.
No, I hear you, man. And I'm frankly, I'm sick of talking about Skinner. We spent a whole episode the last time I think we were together talking about Skinner after his 1000th game. I think that episode was titled, the focus shifts to his future. We spent a lot of time talking about it then. We're talking about it now. We're probably going to talk about it in June, July. We've done like 20 of these episodes. I haven't dropped an F-bomb yet. That was the first. Oh no, I did once. Someone can go back and find it. I did once. Let's table this for now. We have a lot of time to figure out the Skinner thing. I almost did. But let's go back to the season in the bigger picture. Let's kind of decompress. Sabres did name an MVP this year, right? They named the Rico awardee. Who's your MVP of the season this year? Do you have one? I think it's Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. I was going to wonder if Dahlin was still your MVP, 20 goals on the blue line.
I would say Dahlin is their best player, and that, hasn't changed for me. But the only reason I think things did not get uglier is because of the hot streak that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen had. And, the way he played from January 1st on, I think is, it's a full team and all that, but the biggest reason that they were able to claw back to respectability is because of the way that he played. And they were a mess early in the season. 73-point pace in October, November, and December before he hit that stride, before they figured out goaltending. So he's, to me, the most valuable player. He's the best. He's the biggest bright spot too, because
so we're going to talk about that then. Okay.
That was, the biggest question on this team for the last 2 or 3 years, is what they were going to do in net. And it seems like they have it. I think you go into next season with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Devin Levi, and you're feeling pretty good.
Who finishes higher in the voting for their respective position trophies, Dahlin or Luukkonen, in the league? As far as Luukkonen for the Vezina, like who finishes higher? Does Dahlin finish higher?
Dahlin probably would. I don't know if Luukkonen will get votes.
I don't know. I'm just, but that's my point. I think like maybe the case for Dahlin, it's not like the best way to argue it, obviously. But I agree with you. I think that the brightest spot is, I was thinking about it, like, is Luukkonen your MVP or is he your brightest spot, or is he both? I could see it either way. We've talked a lot about Luukkonen this year, just coming out of kind of emerging. Didn't come out of nowhere. I almost said what I don't believe. I don't think he came out of nowhere. I think he just grew into the role. But Dahlin might be, I don't know. The brightest spot for me is actually Zach Benson.
A strong candidate as well. I think there's three. There's UPL, there's JJ Peterka, and there's Zach Benson.
Peterka, yeah. And I just think Benson just was, especially the way he ended the season. 7 points in his last 7 games. Always on the puck. He was a dog from start to finish this year. I think he really shined, to use, to kind of correlate with the bright spot. But yeah, it's hard finding bright spots, but I really enjoy talking about Benson as a player. He got to 30 points tonight. I know it's not huge. Played nearly a full season, stayed healthy, played up the lineup. Another guy that surpassed Jeff Skinner. I don't even think he's 19 years old yet.
Well, not only is he not 19 years old, what I would point out about Zach Benson is that last summer he had the deep run in the WHL playoffs. He goes to the NHL Combine. He goes to the NHL Draft. He goes to development camp. He does all this stuff. A far from normal summer in terms of training for an NHL season.
He had to put up the
And
super loop 7 times at
yeah,
the carnivals.
that's right. The donut stand, the I wonder if they have I got it in the carnival stands out there.
Probably.
Maybe.
He's got a few of those red balls in his hockey bag. I think they do. Yeah.
Maybe he can carve out some maybe if he sticks around Buffalo, he could give the Queen of Heaven some
there you go.
Some pointers. But like think about that summer that he had, and he comes in at 18 years old, makes the team, plays a full season without he had some lulls, but he finished stronger than he even started, and he came out of the gates, and stole a roster spot. So get this guy home, get him, recovered, rested, and get him a full off season of training. He is the type of guy who will put it to use. He's the type of guy I am not necessarily worried about a drop off or a sophomore slump. Could it happen? Will the scoring automatically jump? Nothing is automatic. Progression and development aren't always upward. There could be some steps.
Yeah, we just saw 90% of the team go backwards this year.
So well, that's the thing, right? That's why I'm not sitting here and assuming he can only go up, but he's just the type of guy that I think will make the most of that, and really, the end of the season will make him hungrier for what he could do next season. And he already had the reason he's not one I worry about is because he already has all those little details, all these things that we were, over and over and over again talking about this team not going to the right areas of the ice, not competing on a nightly basis, slipping up on habits and details in all 3 zones. And he's got all that. He just needs to get bigger and stronger and, develop a bit more of a finishing touch. These are all things that an off season can help you with, I think. And all the other stuff, he's already ahead of too many players on the Sabres roster. A credit to Zach Benson, but a discredit to some of the others and the way they play at times.
He was my bright spot, but I will hear the Luukkonen talk for sure. I'm glad that they put Comrie in there tonight. I thought it was a nice little touch. Kind of sent him off. Played a good game, got the win, and we'll see what happens with Eric Comrie moving forward. So we talked a little bit briefly about MVP. I didn't give you an answer. I kind of want to think it's Luukkonen. That's kind of what I wrote down. I want to kind of go through the Dahlin thing a little bit. I wanted to throw that little who's going to rank higher in the end of season awards, just food for thought. But I ultimately agree because I think the MVP is like, who is a judge to be the most valuable to the team itself and their placement in the standings and getting wins every night. And I certainly think that that's for sure Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. I already hit on this. I don't know if I got your answer, if you want to give an answer. Is Tage your most disappointing, or is it Skinner, or is there another one that I'm not even thinking of? Is Owen Power a disappointment for you? I mean, Cousins?
I think Cousins is pretty high on my list. Tage Thompson, I have a difficult time with because of the injury and how long that might have lingered. And you're talking about a wrist/hand injury on a guy that relies a lot on stick handling and shooting. So,
and it's not his fault that the rest of the team didn't pick up the slack when he was
correct. And he came back earlier than he probably should have. So, You could lump a lot of those guys into that bucket, and it's hard to pick the one who's the most disappointing because I think the most disappointing part is the collective. That Tage Thompson couldn't have a disappointing season because nobody picked up the slack. Because Alex Tuck also had a disappointing season, and he couldn't, the top line couldn't afford to have it because Dylan Cousins had a disappointing season, and Jeff Skinner did too. And no, they weren't getting as much from their blue line either because Owen Power didn't have the best season. So I don't even know how you pick, frankly. I guess it goes to Tage because the ceiling there is the highest.
I like
But
your answer about the collective, though. That's actually the best way to answer that, and I'll accept that answer.
that's good.
I'm
So
not
that's the
I'm
best
not
I
letting
can
you
do.
off the hook. I'm not letting you off the hook. I wanna go back to UPL for a second. There's something that I wrote down, and it's been a while since we got together, but Sabres nominee for the Masterton Trophy, and there were a couple things that came into my head when that news came out, because the Bill Masterton, for those that don't know, that trophy is awarded annually to the National Hockey League player who best exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to ice hockey. Two things that come to mind. Number one was the day that the Sabres signed Comrie. Kevin Adams goes in, he leaves the little common area, goes into his office and calls Luukkonen. You remember that from the embedded? Really important moment in retrospect. Keeping his head in the game. That's good leadership from Kevin Adams, making that call to Luukkonen that day. Luukkonen dealt with it the right way. And if you go in that, where he was that day versus where he is now, good for Luukkonen. Second, Seamus Kotick, goaltending development coach. If you know Seamus, he takes it like when you talk to him about dealing with the prospects, he treats them like his own children. He talks, his words, he's like, I try to coach him with love. And his development philosophy worked here, I think, with Luukkonen. I wanted to point that out because Seamus doesn't get talked about a lot by the media. He's got an important job mentoring one of the most important positions in professional sports. I always say when you're a goaltending coach, it's 93% psychologist. But there's more to it when you're developing a young player playing a very difficult position and, trying to aspire to get up there to the top level of the sport. Wanted to point that out because Seamus does good work, and he worked very hard with Luukkonen for several years, going to Finland when he wasn't setting the world on fire, was instrumental in getting him to Sudbury. That changed the relationship because Seamus could get up there very often. Of course, Luukkonen had to go to Cincinnati in the Coast League. He had to go through and play in front of some tough defensive teams in front of him in Rochester. I wanted to point that out because, again, when you look at the definition of the award, perseverance, sportsmanship, dedication, ice hockey. Yeah, I mean, he's getting paid to play hockey. He's dedicated, right? But the perseverance is the one that really sticks out to me. And I think Seamus really helped UPL with that. So I just wanted to kind of mention that.
And I think a big thing with Seamus, when I've talked to him, the few conversations we've had, a big part of his philosophy too that I think he sticks to is that he's trying to best he can. Of course, no two circumstances are alike, but he's trying to treat every single goalie prospect the same. Because at the time when we had the same meaning with the same love and energy and passion, not applying the same plan to every prospect, but he's trying to devote the same energy within reason, of course, to every prospect that he's dealing with, which was a thing when they had Eric Portillo and Devin Levi, and the writing was on the wall a little bit, which direction that was going, but it didn't really alter his approach. And to your point, he was still years down the road in this process with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen while everybody was talking about Devin Levi, and he didn't lose sight of that. So that was an easy pick. The way that nominee is decided is that the PHWA writers in Buffalo all submit a top 3, and you know, via a point system, we can nominate one player from the Sabres, and it was Luukkonen, and the 3 guys for me, Luukkonen was number 1, Jack Quinn was number 2, and I'm not sure if this would have been a popular pick, but Henri Jokiharju was number 3 for me, just given everything he went through injury-wise off the ice last year to get back to, playing the way he did by the end of the season, I think was a pretty commendable effort, and probably not a coincidence that, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Henri Jokiharju were both on my list, because I think maybe neither one of them is there without the other one, and their friendship off the ice, I think, is a big driving force for both of them, and makes for an interesting offseason decision with Jokiharju, because both of those guys are now RFAs. Presumably you would want Luukkonen back on a decent contract.
Oh, yeah.
And, that being his closest friend on the team and fellow countryman and all that, it's not going to make your decision, but, it's a small factor.
We're going to talk about Henry. We'll be talking about Henry for sure, but no, just, yeah. So I wanted to mention Seamus, because Seamus doesn't get recognition. He doesn't want recognition. He just wants to get these guys to believe in themselves. That's his whole mission, and worth pointing out. So for one final time this year, if it's worth it, we're going to retire that one for a few months. Let's go through the chat. What do you say? We're closing in on an hour here. Talked about Skinner again. Didn't think we were going to do that. Got anything? Let's start at the top. Cantor was in here early. Cantor is in the Bahamas, so I just want to throw that up. And hello from the Bahamas. Hello, Steven. I don't speak Spanish, but I believe that means more tequila, please. 2 weeks from today, I will be getting my tequila on in the Central America, going to Costa Rica, allegedly. See if I get there. What else we got? You got anything up here?
I do have something.
Started a couple. Jay Everett was in here early. We'll just throw this up. Another season ending with more excitement from the farm team than the big club. He also was on the tequila train. Yeah, so real quick, Rochester currently in second place in the division, 3 games left. They got one big one against Cleveland. Isak Rosane getting hot at the right time, points in 4 straight. He had 2+1 last game. Kulik starting to heat up. He had 3 goals and an assist his last time out. Anton Wahlberg's been playing very well. He only had 5 goals and 5 assists all season in Sweden. He's already got a goal and 3 assists through his first 6 games. But Devin Levi's been awesome. We're talking about UPL. Can't talk about UPL without talking about Levi. 925 save percentage, won 7 of his last 8 starts. So there is hockey left in the Sabres system for those that still give a shit about hockey this season. And I would highly encourage fans to get out to Rochester. Matthew, you and I should probably get out to Rochester, actually. I'll drive.
How about Neil here? I think this probably creates an interesting game of, do they stay or do they go?
Okay.
We'll go one by one. Neil says, was tonight's game the last game in a Sabres uniform for, and he lists off a bunch of players. So I'm going to throw them at you, Kris.
Okay.
Was it the last game in a Sabres uniform for Peyton Krebs? RFA, coming off a disappointing season, big piece of the Jack Eichel trade. Are you trying to move on from Peyton Krebs this offseason?
Am I trying to? Yeah, he's certainly available. Do I think you're going to be able to find a trade partner out in Western Canada? I don't know. I think it's a greater than 50% chance. Can I do this? That he's here again next year as an asset that they're going to retain, but yet still on watch.
Zemgus Girgensons unrestricted free agent, important to the fabric.
Okay, I'll give it to you like this. If you buy out Jeff Skinner, you're gonna bring him back on the cheap.
Yeah, because you got an extra spot. And, clearly they didn't get their doors blown off by an offer at the deadline. So that might hint at the market value of Zemgus Girgensson. So maybe they can
Yep.
get him a little cheaper than the sweet contracts he's been getting here in Buffalo the last few years.
Yeah.
Tyson Jost.
I'm gonna put both of these guys together. Josephson, we'll call them, are no longer part of the organization moving
Yeah, those are
forward.
pretty easy ones, I think. Cale Clegg. I would
Cale
throw
Clegg will look for a job elsewhere.
I think so. Didn't play poorly when he got a chance, just didn't get a lot of chances. And he's in that spot where he's going to be looking for the best opportunity. Yoka Harju and Jacob Bryson.
We're going to talk about Yoki Haru later. He's in the pile of players that if I need to add, because it's well established that I think you're feeling good about goaltending and defense. Do you have to move a Henry Yoki Haru? No. If you need to add a different element to your blue line, he would be one that I would likely get out from under. Say you need to add we just saw Eric Cernak play tonight, right? Like a big, just kind of tough, hard nose, kind of an ass kicker. If you got to add a little bit of that protective element, a little more territorial nature to your blue line, a Yoki Haru would be a guy. But I mean, I think other than that, I think he's here. I see that Bryson's the next one. Bryson he's that depth guy. Not at the same price tag. Is he back? Right? Not at because he's up, right?
He is also an RFA, as is Yoki Haru.
Well, you can't go backwards on him, probably, right? Because don't you have to qualify?
Yeah, so
that makes it hard because he was 1.8.
He was 1.8. That's a spot where you got Ryan Johnson in the system. I don't know. Bryson had a better year than he did last year. He definitely played better.
I was impressed with his play when he came back up.
I would think you could do better than that.
For who he is.
Especially if you're moving out Yoki Haru, I would think you need to upgrade your depth a little bit and do better than Bryson. The last two are easy for me. Eric Comrie and Eric Robinson. Comrie is no. I don't think he would want to be back anyways after not playing for as long as he did. And I don't think there would be a tremendous amount of interest in having him back given the other goalies that they have and the fact that they clearly don't trust him. Eric Robinson, I don't necessarily need him back either. So I'm going to say he played his last game.
I think so too. Can you get him back in like that Stephen Fogarty type of role where, he's more of an AHL guy that has a 2-way contract and you can do something like that? All day, I would do that. I think he'd be a really good asset to your AHL roster. We'll have to see how the market plays out for a guy like Robinson. But those are my conditions on him coming back. Not full-time NHL. And listen, I thought he was serviceable. I like the element that he brought to the team. Just you need, I think your words, a better version of that.
Yeah, that's to me, the biggest of all the assets they have this offseason between cap space, draft picks, prospects. The biggest plus, I think, that they can't afford to squander is the roster spots. They're open. You got spots. And we saw last year what happens when you don't take advantage of that and you just bring back a similar looking group. There's an opportunity for change there that you don't always get in the NHL when you're locked into some of these contracts. That spot can be upgraded.
I wonder if you can I want to know what happens with Bryson this offseason. I'd have to think about that. Yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean, Ryan Johnson. Not you can't block Ryan Johnson. We'll see what Johnson does in the AHL playoffs here, but I mean, we saw some really good things from him when he was up here. We saw some learning moments, some teaching moments, but we also saw some very good things. I think that he's going to help that team, with another year of experience, another offseason coming in. Like he just saw the NHL. He just saw pro hockey for the first time. He's going to go process it this offseason. I would expect Ryan Johnson to actually be very ready to go next year. And I think he helps that team play the system that they need to play. You can't block him with a Bryson. I would throw Bryson give him one of those. So the Sabres have 42 contracts right now. The Capitals and the Sabres have the fewest contracts in the league right now as it presently stands, 42 of 50. Bryson, could you throw him 350 AHL salary? 375 AHL salary and get him to, I don't know. You got to kind of negotiate obviously what his NHL salary would be, but you got to keep those guys like the Clegg. We just talked about Clegg. I think Clegg will probably go somewhere else. You need guys like that have a little bit of NHL experience that can hold the fort down. I mean, again, that's another guy, kind of like what we just said with Bryson. Got to see with Robinson. Got to see what the market gives him. Not that he's UFA. That's the thing. So, I mean, are you gonna? You got to qualify him though, right? So it's like you got to give him a bona fide offer. I mean, are they just gonna not qualify him?
Possibly.
That's a tough
That's a
one,
tough
man,
one.
actually.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. Okay. That's a good question, Neil. Little brain buster at 11 o'clock at night, you bastard.
And it ties into Josh's question is how many new players are added in? It depends very much on the answers that we just gave to that question.
A successful offseason for me, honestly, I want a top 6 guy, and I want at least one asshole in the bottom 6. Guy that plays hard, pisses the other team off, drags your team into stuff that doesn't cost less than $2 million. And you know who I'm talking about too, actually. We're not gonna go there right now, but I think you know the exact player.
I mean, we could, but
Yeah, let's wait.
I would also add that the top 6 guy can also be an asshole.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
That's true.
But
Well,
you
I said
still
at least one. At
but you
least
still
one.
need another one.
Yeah.
You still need
Yeah.
another one. I just want to
Mhm.
make sure that any, of those types of players who listen to the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show don't turn it off thinking the only spot available for that type of guy is in the bottom 6.
That's true.
It's
Good call.
you could use more than one of those. I think a successful offseason is 3 outside veteran additions at least. Like 3 new veterans and then maybe 1 new prospect coming through and taking an NHL job. That's my initial gut feel that
Mhm.
is subject to change as I continue to sift through exactly, because that question from Neil is a great example of a lot of these tiny little decisions that will impact that final number of how many new guys. But I think change needs to happen. And I think at least 2 new assistant coaches.
I just started a comment. You wanna take a look at it real quick and let me know if you wanna go there? The bottom one?
Yeah. Why not?
Andrewsy.
Yeah.
Should the Sabres make another run at Stamkos if he makes it to UFA? What about the Sabres trade for Lawson Krause? Team needs another skilled power forward like a Kachuk type. Hallelujah on that last one. Matthew, I'll let you take the first 2 sentences on that because I think we're going to agree on both.
I like either one, Stamkos or Lawson Krause.
Uh-huh.
Stamkos is, to me, that could be top of the list if you could get him.
Yeah. Big
threw it
if,
out
obviously.
there
Yeah.
last week, in Fantasyland, what would you pay him? I think that's where the conversation gets really interesting because you will have to overpay. There's no doubt about that, to get a guy like that, if he hits the market, to come to Buffalo, a guy who is in the latter part of his career, has won plenty, but still, I'm sure, wants to squeeze as much winning as possible out of his career. But he'd be perfect. I mean, you talk about all this uncertainty in the top six and the scoring drop off and the power play not being any good and, a lack of veteran leadership. He's got all of it. He's Tampa's captain. He's, won cups. He's one of the best
Another four,
power plays scorers. He
another
scored
40
what?
goal season.
Yeah, he scored his 40th against the Sabres here Monday night. So he's still got it, and he's, I don't think you can quite measure. It's the same, a lot of the same reasons you go after Patrick Kane, except arguably a better on ice fit, right? And
Better
probably
leader.
better
Better
leader.
leader, won the cup. So what have we talked about? Forget what we've talked about in past episodes. What have we talked about tonight? Make the power play better. Maybe you can go out and make this big splash with a big top six guy that bumps one of your other guys down. You have a really balanced lineup. It also keeps your prospects hungry. Those guys that are future top six fits, and inevitably you're going to have injuries. That's part of the reason why I'm not ready to just like necessarily budget like roles for next year with these prospects. Every guy's got to earn it. One of them could, but that's a big yes for me. It's a big if though too. Like if you would have a chance at getting them, right? I think that's clear. But that would be like crazy good, like ideal. I know
Well,
he's
and
up
that's
there in
where
age, but he can still fill the net, man.
absolutely on ice, off ice, checks all the boxes. The big variable is he's a UFA. He's going to get to pick his spot.
Yeah.
In theory, he'd be coming closer to home, so you have that slight, benefit. But this is, again, we don't have to get all the way down the rabbit hole. But again, it's, imagine if you didn't have the $9 million Jeff Skinner on your books.
Yeah.
How much better you'd feel about overpaying by even a little bit extra, right? And giving a little bit more term than maybe somebody else is willing to offer. That's where at some point you got to draw the line in the sand.
Cummings says I'd carry Lawson Krause here and Mike Titanium back if they can get to Salt Lake City to give them up. Yeah.
That does change the dynamic. The Salt Lake City thing, new ownership, new market.
Yeah.
They're probably going to be trying to aggressively build a contender. And that guy is a nice piece for a contender. So that might change it was always easy to look at Arizona and try to pick off your favorite, trade targets. But, that's not going to be, or maybe, who knows? Who knows how they'll act up there, but it seems like that probably won't be the case.
On Stamkos, Joe DiBiase from GR. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter. He's got some crazy off the reservation takes. Okay, great kid, but he did
Some
say something
sneaky
that was
takes.
really funny. He did say something really funny about Stamkos. He's like, do whatever it takes. He's like, give him a percentage of ownership. That's what it might take.
Well, who would complain about that?
Exactly. Oh man, there's a lot in the chat.
Well, here's the
throwing
last
that
part of that is the team needs another skilled power forward like a Kachuk type.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
Maybe you go
I
get a
would give,
Kachuk.
yeah, I'd give a nut to get a Kachuk. And yeah, either one of them. That's well established, I think. But yeah, oh, listen, yeah, I mean, that's going to be an off-season episode at some point where it's like, we just saw the Bills trade Stephon Diggs, right? And it's like, do the Sabres have an off-season blockbuster in them? And because I don't think we just saw it. Like, did we just see it with like Middlestat for Bowen Byram? No, I don't think that's. I mean,
That's not a Diggs level blockbuster.
no, it was a blockbuster in the sense of like the trade deadline, because you know what I mean. But that's not a Diggs level blockbuster, but I'd like to go through some ones that are going to hurt some fans. I think if you talk about some of these, like what I would give up to get a Kachuk, I'd give up quite a bit. And I know,
Got to give to get.
and they're very polarizing, man. Anytime I mention Kachuk on X, I hear all about how some fans do not like. There's a Kachuk bias with some fans. There's a lot of fans that get the appeal. There's a lot that cannot stand the idea of a team giving up something of value to go out and get, especially Brady. People do not like Brady. I love Brady.
Well, if you're a Sabres fan, he plays on a rival team and plays a game that makes you hate him. But he's that classic. You hate him when you're playing against him, and you love him when he's playing for you. He's the classic guy, and probably some untapped potential still in his game. A lot of runway, I think. He'll be an interesting offseason conversation for us. You
Another
probably got to
guy,
tame him
captain
a
of a
little bit.
team.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You probably got to tame him a little bit, but you always want to be careful with guys like that trying to tame them, right? You don't want to take the edge away, and I don't think you could from a Kachuk. I don't think it's allowed in that family, but yeah, I mean,
you can't cut his balls off in any way when you're getting him to get the other guys to grow some.
Exactly. And yeah, does he have a ton of penalty minutes this year? Yes, but that's what you get when you play the way that he plays. So that's the type of thing that they need to be, if not now, then when, right? If you're Kevin Adams, because do you get 5 years of missing the playoffs? So if Brady Kachuk somehow becomes available, you have to be looking at other teams the way the rest of the NHL was looking at the Sabres when things were going sideways with Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart and Rasmus Ristolainen, and finding the opportunity. I mean, throwing Rasmus Ristolainen in the same group as those two players. I know he's not on their level as a player, but looking for opportunities to make trades. Nobody would have thought a couple years before Jack Eichel got traded that he'd be available, but everybody has a price and everybody has a breaking point, and things are not going well in Ottawa. So when is that breaking point?
We will talk about it. Okay, we will talk about it. Now, keep in mind, I'll reel us in just a tad. Okay, we talked it like an hour ago when we started this episode off saying we don't think it's going to be like major blow up the roster or anything like that. That would qualify likely because of what you're going to give up to get a player like that. But it's a fun exercise and it's a long off season. So we will talk about it. We should have fun with it. But don't be surprised when I'm going to throw out some stuff that no one wants to get rid of. I'll just say that.
To get a guy like that,
you have to.
People know you're going to have to get rid of.
Every good trade has to hurt a little, man. Yeah, you're not going to get, you're not going to give up 3 bites of cheeseburger for Kobe beef. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen. Anything else in the chat, you?
It got busy. A lot of debate amongst the chatters, but I don't have any other questions starred.
Okay. I will thank the chat while looking here. Nevada. Okay, yeah, there was a lot of Skinner. I guess I was crazy for saying something. I can skip Brady's name when I read the ring on the cup for the 2026 Sabres. It might. Hey, listen,
it's a good approach. If you don't like him, if he gets the win, I think everybody can stomach.
It's rational.
Nice stuff.
Rational. I just have a style of player that that's been missing here for a long time. And the Sabres drafted Brendan Lemieux, totally different player than Brady Tkachuk, but the same type of prick. And I don't know. I look at whatever. I don't want to go. I'm not comparing Brendan Lemieux to Brady Tkachuk, like statistically and total impact on the lineup. I'm just saying, like, we're ready for that here. The city would embrace the way that Brady Tkachuk plays, man, or Matthew for that matter. By the way, and I like Matthew more than I like Brady. I'm sitting here sucking off Brady. I like Matthew probably at least 3x what I
Well,
like
yeah.
Brady.
I mean,
But yeah,
missed the boat on that one.
yeah, for sure, for sure. All right. Dan Meyer, have a fantastic offseason. Aspen and Tito. Thanks, Dan. They have been actually behaving today, although I did leave a bag of garbage out before I went to bed last night. Aspen got into it. So I had to wake up to that. All right. Done talking about the dogs. I think I'm done talking about hockey. It's 10 after 11. For those that are in bed, thank you for having Matthew and I in bed with you tonight. We always enjoy that. For those listening audio in the morning, you'll be like, what is he talking about? It's about 11:10 at PM that we're trying to get out of here. I always go through the chat, by the way, after the episode. I'll go back and check it out. I hate to get off right now, though. Like the numbers just grew. More people just came in. You know, I hate
Well, we
to end it
started
right
talking
now.
about Stamkos and Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah, word gets out. I love it. Back-to-back comments in the chat, just to kind of prove my point. I love both Tkachuks. Get one. Very next chat, Steven. I hate both Tkachuks. It's just like,
Well, this one's my favorite. I hate both Tkachuks, especially that whiny one Brady, but I would trade half the roster for him. That is the best Brady Tkachuk comment of the night.
I love
right
it,
there.
man.
That
I
sums him
love
up
it.
in a nutshell. It's like,
I love it.
you know, you hate him, but you recognize his value. That's all that really matters.
Cummings on Stamkos says Stamkos isn't going to want to end the Sabres drought. He's going to want to go to a top 5 team and chase another ring. Maybe not. Money might talk. You're going to have to overpay if you're Buffalo to get that type of talent to come here in UFA for sure. Yeah, a lot more Brady stuff. It goes on and on. Yeah, so it's fun to go through the chat. Matthew, unless you see anything else, I think I'll get us out of here. We're a $1:20 into this thing. I thought maybe we'd go for an hour most, but it was a good chat. This was a healthy chat. Again, I didn't think about the team for a good week and a half, man, and it was really good. But I'm
We're
back.
gonna have a lot to talk about by the end of the week, I think. So this is a good place to put a pin in it. We'll see what the fellas have to say this week. We'll see what the Brain Trust has to say at the end of the week, and we'll reconvene as we have some more to talk about. 82 games in, season 1 of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. I guess
yeah.
I guess this would be it, right? So
I guess this is it. Yeah.
unless we count the end of season presser episode as the end of season 1, maybe we can save our spiels.
One final thought on Stamkos. I love all of our chatters. I especially like Coda. Stammer has made around 100 million. Don't think that matters. That maybe, right?
We're all playing armchair psychologist here, right? We're getting in Steven Stamkos' head. Who knows? But the hockey part of it is kind of a no-brainer to make a run at it for the Sabres at the very least.
All right, man. Good way to end. So let's get together after. We got to do it quickly while like the paint is still wet on the end of season stuff. So, maybe not Friday, maybe Saturday, maybe like early next week or something like that. We'll give you a weekend off. You're probably going to have to be jamming out stories anyways. Let me know when you're free. We'll tweet it out. Hopefully everyone in the chat sticks with us. This thing has been growing every week, seemingly. Like I said, we're going to be around all summer. I hope you guys are game for that. I don't want to be saying goodbye to some of you guys until fall. Hope you're here next time and the time after that. And we'll have a drinking show this summer. At least I will. I won't drag Matthew into that, but I never have turned down a summer drink. All right. I think that's it. For Matthew Fairburn, the younger brother never had. You can find him at The Athletic. For the production crew who've been working their ass off all season long, they get a little bit of a breather. I'm Kris Baker. Thanks everyone for hopping in. We'll see you again very soon.